whoever does the UFC thing. Anyways, everyone, welcome back to another late episode of Beyond the Snap. It's not really that late, but me and Kieran have to get to bed early tonight because we got a homecoming game to go play tomorrow at 7. Well, the game doesn't kick off 7, but we got to be there at 7, so we're going to bed early. Anyways, on this slate, we're gonna bring you what happened last week. What were the three big games that we saw, and how we reacted to them. And additionally, we're going to be covering the three biggest games next week. And of course, we're including the biggest game of the week and maybe a big game for the Big Ten playoff odds and championship game. We're going to get to that later, though. All right, first, let's jump in straight to reactions. Kieran, what did you think about the good old game, Navy, your Navy, versus the Notre Dame Fighting Irish?
Well, as we would both know from intimate personal experience over multiple times, it is very hard to commit 6 turnovers and win a football game. The two of us have done it, but it is extremely hard. And when you're not the kind of team that can really come from behind in the same sense as other teams can, because Navy has to have the run to establish the pass, right? And you have to be able to take time off the clock and take the air out of the football to consistently win games, and they weren't able to do that. And because Notre Dame was able to shut down their explosiveness, particularly in the linebacker core, you saw just a lot of downhill flow, right? Being able to flow the ball, get to the ball, disrupt the ball carrier, and create a lot of down and distance issues for Navy, which resulted in a lot of careless turnovers, which resulted in a lot of Notre Dame scores. So you saw this game get lopsided really fast, and it made me very sad. But sometimes your team has to lose in order for, you know what, I'm not even going to say anything. Yeah, come on, Navy, you can do better.
Yeah, that's a great recap. I think Navy got introduced to real football, I have to say. I think that, of course, we've seen them go for the first time since, I believe, 1989. They've been 5-0, 6-0, but now they got reintroduced to good old fashioned Irish football. And the Irish came to play. They said NIU was just a fluke, and it's time for us to get back on our high horse and start dominating, which of course they did. And so now the AAC is looking wide open. So you have teams like Tulane sneaking in there. Of course, it's guarded heavily by Army, but Army will have a fun test this week against another military school. So we're gonna see how it plays out. And yes, I think limiting turnovers is one of the biggest things. We talk so highly about Army and Navy because of the fact that they rely so heavily on the run game and that they really limit turnovers to a minimum. I believe going into this game they had maybe one turnover on the year, two max. But of course, after you throw when you have six different turnovers on six different occasions, it just gets ugly real fast. You're giving the ball to the offense in premier position, so it happens. Get back on the high horse and you go win a couple of the games. You got to still worry about Army, so go deal with that later. Anyways, let's move on to the next recap. And this one was a doozy. This was how do we call it? SEC After Dark in the loudest stadium, in the rowdiest fans. The good old Aggies, which Kieran is very familiar with. Kieran, what did we see from the rivals, as you would like to call them?
So there were a lot of different phases to this game. It was one of those games that really broke down into a momentum it was a momentum affair. And that I think is a product of what the Aggies call the 12th man, but what I will call a crowd because some of us use English to describe things. And they were able to really take advantage of that momentum, right? They lost it early. LSU put an absolute hurting on the Aggies, and they were able to be consistent. Nussmeier was putting the ball where he needed to be. He was confident, and he was beating the Aggies at their own game, destroying their defense. There was good protection from the O line, and LSU was rolling. And then Mike Elko, who might just be the coach of the year, because A&M can't win and he's made them win. I don't know how it happened, but he's very good. And he decides to pull Connor Wigman because the offense was looking stagnant. They weren't able to pass it. The LSU pass rush was getting home, and they weren't able to open up the run with having any threat of the pass. And Wigman gets pulled, And then it adds an element that it turns out LSU couldn't defend, and that is the ability of Marcel Reed to run the football. It was incredibly impressive. You saw Navy and Colin Klein really almost reverting to an option style offense, right? Not RPO, just good old RO, run option. There are options to run the ball. You're trying to get it to a back. You're holding that mesh to hold the defender, pulling in for touchdowns. Marcel Reed rushed for 3 touchdowns, passed twice for 77 yards, which tells you how concerned they were about his legs, and just looks like the Aggies QB1. If he continues this level of play, A&M can win a national championship, and I mean that. There's a really good chance that if A&M, even if they don't make it to the SEC playoff, they're able to get, or SEC championship, excuse me, they're able to get a solid first round bye, play at Kyle Field, and just keep rolling. And I think that's really something that we have to contend with at this point, and understand that A&M could be a force in the SEC, because it's really hard, other than Texas, to pick out another loss on that schedule. And it's looking like they're going to be formidable, and the SEC continues to be a mess.
Yeah. And here's just a fun stat line if anyone was wondering. The total amount of offense last game was, or passing wise, was I believe 134 yards combined. Marcel Reed threw 2 passes for 70 yards, and Connor Weigman, I believe, threw 6 passes complete for 64 yards. 0 touchdowns, 0 picks. This was a dominant running game. Now, I think we have to give flowers to where it's due, and I think give Mike Elko his flowers. He made the just expert decision to say, you know what, well, this isn't working with Wiegman. We're taking too many sacks in the backfield. He's not being decisive enough. We need someone who can literally turn the script, and we put in Marcel Reed. Now, again, you open up this big debate. Marcel Reed started a couple of games ago. They went with Connor Wiegman. Wiegman balled out last week, or the week prior, actually, because we're not talking about LSU. So now you get into this point where you're like, well, where do we go from here? I think as an A&M Aggie, you have to really decide how do you want to play the rest of how do you want to play the rest of your season? Excuse me. Um, you could say, look, we think Connor Weigman is a better passer of the football, but we understand that our run game is just too dominant. We have all these people in the backfield that are just outstanding. We have Moss, Le'Veon Moss, we have everybody we need, and now Marcel Reed just adds another dynamic to that, and our wide receivers aren't getting as much action, but what can we really do about it? Or you say maybe we try to, again, go back to Weigman, maybe give him another shot at it, go into this passing offense just to literally keep everybody on their toes until we get to play A&M, or UT in this case, and then you figure out what you want to do and you have that element of surprise. I think that LSU literally could not do anything about it. I think the moment Marcel Reed came in, the game just turned on its head. Everything was just electric from that moment onward. He was breaking tackles left and right. And then the biggest thing was Garrett Nussmeyer. He looked like a deer in headlights. He got to a point where he was just taking a sack, and then he was making errant bad throws where he can't be placing the ball that tight next to a DB. DB would get the pick, and then that element of the 12th man that I brought up earlier would come back into effect. Just that feeling you're playing in front of 104,000 rowdy fans that are just ready for you, are ready to pick, like, just make fun of you at every moment, and it's just intimidating. And I think that extra factor is what brought this team back together, because they were looking decimated after the first half. You were wondering, like, oh, what is going to really happen here? And then the fact they all gelled together just to make this insane comeback. I mean, I feel like part of it has to be added to the 12th man effect. So if you didn't believe the EA college football rankings of why Kyle Field is that high, you should now, because it's real. Anyways, enough talking about the good old Gig'em. Let's get into Kansas State, the good old rivalry. Kieran, why was this game so close for such polar opposite teams?
Well, I think Kansas was able to just stick around, just be able to linger like an irritating cold or an
Kind of like a
irritating
Vanderbilt.
injury. What?
Kind of like a Vanderbilt.
No, no, nothing like a Vanderbilt. They were put away in like the second quarter and they didn't come back. I mean,
Ugh,
really, having to kick an onside kick, that's just petty. I mean, when you're down 10, oh, they were down 3. When you're down by multiple
two.
points, it's really, really, there's no need to kick an onside kick. You know you're going to lose anyway. Okay, enough of that. Back to Kansas State. Yeah, so Kansas State didn't come out as hot as they wanted to, and Kansas stuck around. And you're seeing a situation where you have a good quarterback and Kirtan's Heisman favorite, but you have just that edge, that extra tenacity that's resulting from it being a rivalry game, and that's what's keeping you in it. And they were within a field goal, but Kansas State able to get the ball back and kneel it to close out the game. But what a fantastic game, especially if you tuned in late and were surprised that it was still close.
Yeah, and like I always say, I think it's just rivalry week. You just don't understand what to happen or what can happen. I mean, look at the OU Texas game. Honestly, after that first quarter, I didn't know who was going to win the game. But then, of course, Sarkisian pulled it all together. And it's just when it comes to rivalries, you really don't know which way it's going to go. Same thing. It goes all the way from the level of Georgia Tech, Georgia to Navy, Army to everything that's close can be up to chance, and everything that seems improbable is still possible. So I'm gonna leave it at that for those games. Now we're gonna jump into our three predictions. Sorry, we're skipping over a little bit of stuff. We just want to get this going because tomorrow's Saturday, and we want you to have a fresh, clean slate and understand what is happening and what our predictions are. Kieran, who's up first?
Yeah, so first on the docket, we have a game that no one thought would matter. Pitt and SMU. It feels like there are a lot of these this year, but Pitt is undefeated and SMU is undefeated in conference play. This game is actually going to be a big determiner in the ACC, seeing as Miami and Clemson are also undefeated in ACC play, and they do not play each other in ACC in the regular season at least. They may in the championship game. But you have to think that this game for Pitt, you're trying to continue the dream. They've absolutely been dreaming 7-0 on a Pitt Panthers football team that was one of the worst in the nation last year, and getting in Holstein at QB. He's been outstanding, consistent, leading the team, and just being where you need to be offensively and being stingy enough defensively to not give up big plays and big points. So, Pitt, it's been an amazing year. And this is perhaps your toughest game yet, I think, against a high flying SMU team that's been incredibly consistent and offensively potent. I and it's in SMU's building too. I have to lean SMU on this one. I have watched Pitt football this year, and what I've seen is both very impressive and scary for being contended as a top team. I just don't think that Pitt can hang on, but I would be happy to be proven wrong. That said, my prediction is I think it's going to be a close one, but I think SMU topples the Panthers 31-28.
Yeah, and I think like it's been a really rough road for both these teams. I think they didn't come into the year with ACC at like aspirations. Of course, SMU, this is their actual integration year. So they've never seen this level of competition, but they fit really, really nicely into it and what they've been given. Pittsburgh, look, a lot of your games are very good. You look very dominant, but this is against a real opponent or first ranked opponent that I believe you're going to have to play. I know, of course, West Virginia is a great team that you beat, but you only beat them by 4. And let's not mention how you played some games that were so close to the wire that they shouldn't even count. Like, I know 2 weeks ago you played a team and you only won by I believe 2 points. Forget who you played, but still, your quarterback threw 2 interceptions. I mean, Holstein didn't look great at all. But then recently, last week when you played Syracuse, you put up 41. So the question is, what kind of Pittsburgh are we going to get? Are we going to get the one that is prepped for this game, that is ready to go in and win, or are we going to get the other one? The one that's not ready, the one that's going to throw 2 interceptions for 113 yards and have to rely on the run game. We're just going to have to see. SMU, same with you. SMU started off the year. I mean, you're of course you're chasing back glory, back to the days where y'all were just dominant, pre death penalty, all this stuff. But again, it's been a rocky road. You benched Preston Stone on week 2, early in September for Kevin Jennings. He's been looking solid, but look, your last game against Duke was 27-28. It's nothing to be happy about because of the fact that Duke is not a strong opponent based off everything we've seen. And so you have to really go back and think, is this the right fit? Do we need to put in different personnel? We've been having success. Do we just ride the hot hand? Let's see what we're going to do. I mean, there's so many aspects to it. So I'd have to say I'm still going to go with SMU. I think I trust their football and their game more and just their overall style. And I'm going to have to say 35-24 Mustangs win it. Alrighty. Next, we have a fun one in Air Force Army military school battle. Kieran, who's going to win this one?
So the reason this game is on here is because it's the first comparison we're getting for Army and Navy. They're still both undefeated in conference. They still could play each other in the American Conference title, and I think at least Army has a good playoff shot. So you have to think about how Navy and Army compare. Navy absolutely dismantled Air Force. Can Army do the same? Because it again, any Commanders in Chief game is absolutely a rivalry game. And I think this is a great game for telling if Army is a bona fide contender or not. You get a similarly hyped up, similar atmosphere game to the Navy game against Air Force, and you see if Army can dismantle a genuinely Air Force team that's not been great, right? They've not been super special, but it's still a rivalry game, and obviously they still want to win. I just don't think that Air Force really has a shot in this one. I think Bryson Daly and the absolute just power behind this Army football team is too much. I have Army winning 42-14.
Yeah, and I think Army's just playing a much better holistic game than the Air Force has. Again, like Kieran said, the reason why it's so important is because we really don't know how good any of these military schools are yet. We haven't really seen them play any major competition. I wouldn't say unless look at this Notre Dame game. And so, of course, Air Force. We're not going to lie and tell you that Air Force is such a great competition. We're going to learn so much from them. No, it's a military. It's a what do you call a game? It's a rivalry game. It's a military game, so you know they're going to try extra hard, and it just gives that little bit more emphasis on the game. So you can look at it through a different lens and see, oh, they're actually playing a more competitive game for reason A, reason B, reason C. And I think this is again where Army shows that they're just sheer willpower. They're going to be able to tear up a 1-6 Air Force team. They're going to be able to dominate on the ground, figure out holes, and I think this is why you ranked them as 21. A very solid team trying to be the best, and we know Army is capable of doing so. So again, like Kieran said, this is the biggest tell for how that December 4th game is going to go. So that's all I have to say about that one. And lastly, the game of the week. What is it, Kieran?
So there are two teams in the Big Ten that have a history of it always being a big matchup and Ohio State always winning. That's Ohio State and Penn State. Penn State has been terrible, just frankly terrible, against competition that would be considered better than Penn State going into the game. So in this game, this is a prove it game for Penn State. To me, I get that Penn State has a lot farther to fall than they do to rise in the grand scheme of college football. But when you have the aspirations that Penn State does, I think you have to, absolutely have to win this game if you're James Franklin and you want to stay in that coaching seat and have it be nice and cool. So I've got a couple keys. The first key is does Drew Allard play? Slash, the bigger key to me is if he plays, is he affected by the knee injury he sustained last week? If we see a reduction in his mobility, I think Ohio State, their defense is going to eat them up. I don't think that he's going to be able to extend plays and get receivers open. And I think that the Ohio State offense is just going to be too consistent for any kind of really recourse for Penn State. So, on the other side, if Abdul Carter can make Will Howard's life hell on earth, I think Penn State wins this football game. He has to channel that number 11, channel the two ones, and go for 11 freaking sacks. Because that, to me, is what wins Penn State this game. Will Howard's uncomfortable, and the run game is ineffective. If that Penn State defense is legit and in Penn State, in their stadium, they're able to just pin their ears back, get after the quarterback, and stop the 1-2 punch of Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. I don't think that Ohio State is going to win this game. And the other question for me is, how far does Ohio State fall on a loss? Are they out of playoff contention entirely? Are they looking to be an 11 seed? Is it all over for Ohio State? You have to think about this kind of, the stakes are higher for Ohio State. Penn State can lose this game and still get in where they were projected to get in the preseason. Ohio State, no. And the real question here is who can take it to Oregon. If Penn State's able to smack Ohio State, I think they can take it to Oregon in the championship. If Ohio State wins, I think again they can stick with Oregon and take it to them. And I there is no better pick in college football than picking Ohio State and Penn State to choke in a big game. I've got OSU 35-31.
Yeah. And look, that makes the most sense. I'm not gonna lie. It all sounds smart. It all feeds so perfectly. But look, this is the Big Ten we're talking about. This game, look, so the entire time Kieran's been talking, I have been trying to look into different things, and the big thing I like to use is the college football playoff predictor just to see where all the numbers are. So right now, of course, I forgot to mention this earlier, but if Army can actually win out, they have a 21% chance of making it, which is actually relatively high because the competition around them includes SMU, Clemson, and Kansas State, all teams that are considered really good and really have a high chance of making it. Now, here's the fun part. Penn State and Ohio State have similar numbers. While Ohio State has a 73% chance of making it, Penn State has an 84. Now, a lot of people might say, like, that makes a little to no sense. You would assume Ohio State's the better team. Ohio State almost wants the win more. But here's the thing, if Ohio State loses this game, how far do they fall? Because it's really just up for grabs at that point. Because then you don't know. It's a two-loss Ohio State team. Granted, they lost to the 1 and 2 seed or the 1 and 3 seed. And so you really don't know how it's going to play out. Honestly, this game has less for playoff predictions or playoff implications because you know both these teams are almost guaranteed to make it. So honestly, this is just a game to get you back in the spirit. I think this is a must win for Ohio State. Not for the fact that, oh, we're going to miss playoffs, more for a fact that we need to understand that we can take it to these big opponents. We are still the Ohio State University, not a Ohio State University. And then for Penn State, can James Franklin just finally beat Ohio State? Can he get over the hill? And then it's literally smooth sailing. I believe after you beat Ohio State, the only games you have to worry about are Washington and Minnesota, which are almost guaranteed. And then you have to go stick it to Oregon. And I know if you can handle Ohio State, you can handle Oregon because I don't know how strong Oregon is. Their only real test has been Ohio State, and I would love to see them play some bigger competition. Maybe whenever they play Michigan this week, we're really going to see how that goes. But again, Michigan is Michigan. So that's all I have for Game of the Week. Kieran, anything else to add?
Um, no, I really think this could be a sleepy good week into college football, but we'll be playing a game, so let us know how it is, please.
Yep.
All right. Thank
Hopefully,
you
we'll see
all. Yes.
afterwards.
Yeah. Great fun.
Yeah.
So much fun.
Alrighty. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Beyond the Snap podcast. We will catch you hopefully Sunday, maybe Monday, possibly Tuesday. Election day. Go vote. Peace.